I don't think it's a secret that I love the hollows in Bleach.
I love the Hollows.
Really want the Hollows to come back.
I love the Hollows.
You know how I've been begging this whole arc for the Hollows to come back, and you know how big of a fan I am of the Hollows. Excited I am about the Hollows coming back into the story.
Yeah, I'm kind of a big Hollow fan, and as I continue my first read-through of the series, I'm currently neck-deep in Hollow stuff with the arrival of the Urankars. But I want to take a look back at the early Hollows in Bleach, the masked, soul-eating monsters that captured my imagination and my heart, and maybe even my soul. So let's rank those early Hollows from the one I like the least to my absolute favorite of the pack. So put on your Hollow masks and pray for Don Kanonji to come to your rescue. I'll give my thoughts on each and every Hollow from the early part of the story. And thank you to a friend of mine for providing the names of the Hollows that went unnamed in the series to help make this list a little more clear. And just like with my captain ranking, I am not ranking these based on strength or power. No, this ranking is purely based on my own feelings toward them and my personal opinion. Remember, these are only the Hollows from the start of the series through the Soul Society arc. The ones who, for me, will one day be classics, and kind of already are. So no Zanpakuto and no pretty faces beneath the masks here, as we dive deeper into my love of the Hollows. So in last place, I have Bulbous G. There's not really much to say about this particular Hollow. He had an interesting looking mask, but that's about the most memorable thing about him. He was brutish and animalistic, but he didn't stick around long before he was used as a punching bag for an awakening Chad. And finding out the name to put to his face kinda makes him worse. Bulbous G. Yeah. Bottom of the list. Sorry. Next on the list we have Hexapotus, who has a very memorable design with like the arachnid legs. That's what would give this guy the edge for me over our boy Bulbous G. Hexy has a more interesting design, one that I remembered when I barely remembered the last place spot. Hexapotus doesn't stick around long either, considering Ichigo kills him while he's trying to devour little boy's soul. In the end, Hexapotus is used as nothing more than a tool to reinforce Ichigo's role once he becomes a Soul Reaper. Still, cool design at least. Then we have the Demi-Hollow. The circumstances around the creation of this hollow are more interesting than the actual creature itself. Everything about Don Kanonji accidentally making things worse and bringing it about was pretty entertaining to read, and he's got a pretty cool design with that interesting headpiece that later on D. Roy would have, but he's not one of my favorites. The setting of the fight with him is cool, and the presence of the spiritualist being there while Ichigo's trying to do his job makes things more complicated, but the hollow himself, he's okay, but definitely not great. Next we have another hollow that was unnamed in the series, and I can see why. Numb Chandelier. Yeah, Numb Chandelier. Not the most intimidating name, but I actually really like this hollow. She was so unique among all the others, not so much a giant, physically imposing monster, but instead, she was focused on controlling and manipulating the minds of others. I loved how she turned Orihime's classmates into like mindless thralls and used them as weapons. And thematically, there's something to be said about this chandelier using others as, tools and weapons, while Orihime's powers manifest during these chapters, and she gets, her powers where her little sprites willingly help her and defend her and fight numb chandeliers. It was just an innovative spin on things. I love when hollows have an extra ability that makes them more dangerous, and the unfortunately named numb chandelier definitely was unique among her kind. Rest in peace, Queen. And the next one on the list is pretty special because he's the first hollow we ever saw. Fishbone D. He was one of the absolute OGs. The OG, actually. When I think of hollows, his face comes to mind. Maybe because he was the first we saw, but he just feels like the mold for what a basic hollow is in my mind. I recently joked about him being a Vasto Lorde because of how he walloped someone like Rukia, but in reality, he may not have been that powerful, but he was perfectly threatening enough to launch the threat of the hollows in the story. He caused a lot of damage and put our main characters in harm's way, forcing Ichigo to step up and wield his massive sword for the first time. For that, I will always be grateful to Fishbone. And then next on my list, I have Shrieker. Shrieker was one of the scariest hollows early on because of just how evil and psychotic he was. He was just dripping with this murderous intent, and knowing that he was an awful monster as a living human too, just made him that much scarier as a full-fledged monster. He wasn't sympathetic. We didn't feel like he was some tragic spirit that stuck around as a ghost for too long. No, he was just menacing and depraved and scary. Plus, I liked that he could fly, and I liked his bombs. Those were fun little additions to the kind of threat that he posed. He was just a gross individual and has a fate that we haven't seen anyone else go through in the series since. Shrieker was dragged into hell itself for just how evil he was. That was wild, and I still have many questions about that. But if I was Ichigo, I'd be like, why don't more of these hollows get dragged into hell? Because some of them, like Grand Fisher, probably deserve it. Yeah, Shrieker gets that spot because he was a great villain for a few chapters. In the third place spot, we have Metastasia, who, for those who don't remember, was the hollow from Rukia's flashback that ended up being the reason that she had to kill Kaien. Talk about a horrifying hollow. The design with all of the tendrils and those eyes, really disturbing, and only got worse when he took control of Kaien's body and made him just as disgusting as he was. I still think a lot about the tendrils coming out of Kaien's eye sockets and just... You want to show someone be traumatized by an encounter with a hollow? This is the perfect hollow to do that. I had to place him high on the list because of an effective design, how unnerving he was, and the important role that Metastasia played in Rukia's backstory. Who knows how different things could have been if Kaien had been able to defeat him. In the runner-up spot at number 2, I have Acid Wire, also known as Orihime's dead brother, Sora. Acid Wire exemplifies what makes hollows so interesting to me and why they have captured my imagination since starting the series. While I love my hollows to be scary and evil and threatening, at their core, at that missing hole, they are people. They are people that didn't move on, that couldn't move on, and that haven't had a chance to really be at rest, becoming twisted and warped from who they used to be, turned into something voracious and almost unrecognizable. In Acid Wire's case, Sora's bitterness and death got turned into really resentful, violent actions against his own sister, someone that he loved in life, but that part of him, the human part that was capable of love, was fading away. He really showed what it meant to be a hollow, frightening and ravenous on the outside, but really just a person with something missing within. And at the number 1 spot, we have the Grand Fisher. Is this a surprise to anyone? Come on, I love my evil anglerfish hamster. He had a fantastic design and was perfectly unsettling. His abilities in using his lure to attract people with spiritual awareness was really inventive and made sense for the type of character he was. And of course, he had a massive impact on the story considering he was the one that killed Ichigo's mother. That action alone, and the effect it had on our protagonist, make him one of the most important characters in the story. I'm not kidding, he seriously had such a ripple effect and is the whole reason this whole story is even happening. And for a while even, I thought he was going to turn into a major villain, but alas, that wasn't to be. Still, he was so effective when he first showed up in those chapters, which are some of my favorite chapters in all of manga, and I will always love the Grand Fisher for being the driving force behind that particular story. So that's my ranking of the early hollows in Bleach, at least the ones that were anything more than like background appearances. I would love to hear your list, and please tell me if you love the hollows as much as I do, because I'd love to know that I'm not alone and that I'm not crazy. As always, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you have a wonderful day, and don't let your soul become a hollow's dinner. Please like, subscribe, and take care.